figure. And
well, that would be that would be all right, but the only problem is you're going to find the people all above that. A few seconds. We got to carry this on later. You're telling me we got a few seconds. This is a program to help educate you on some of the issues that are vital to your understanding and way of life, and what can be done to improve it. Only when we get other views can we make intelligent choices regarding the decisions and options available to us for the enrichment and improvement of our lives. Good evening or good afternoon, whichever you would like to see. Truman Sigler for Personalities in the News. This show is dedicated to the memory of John Castle, who started Personalities in the News in 1964 through 2003 on several local stations. The format of this program is educational in nature and based on the constitutions of the United States of America and the Republic of California. Today's program is about where we are today and how we got there. This is number 3 in a series. This will be based on the events of the last week's happenings and our views on them. As these are current events and still in progress, and the full story is still not out and may take more time to research the actual facts. Our first topic will be on the alleged claims of police misconduct. We will first address our observed views on those allegations. Now, the police have for years been placed in the position of using criminal process in civil statutes, which violates due process of law, thereby destroying the people's trust in their actions, that's the police actions. For the last year, we have advised you of many of the issues in play and presented a process based on federal and state constitutional laws, demanding the people's servants in government to bring them back to following the mandates of the constitutions as currently written, but not followed. By using current federal law and constructive notice to all the actors that they have violated their oath of office and the constitutional mandates governing their actions, the events that have happened this week that are of grave importance to all of us. We must use this process now if this great country is to survive. The law enforcement police arresting people for exercising their rights. The hijacking of protesting people by criminal factions that looted, burned, and attacked innocent people's businesses after the marches was and is a war against the foundation and principles of this country and must be dealt with as an invasion. It is being condoned by the same political party under several different names over the years to this date. The actions of the police enforcing criminal action penalties of civil statutes on people that are not subject to those statutes as a means of collecting revenue. The California Constitution mandates that the roadways and waterways shall be free and untaxed. The use of mandatory checkpoints without proper notice or probable cause to inflict confiscation and or theft of personal property. The harassing and arresting of private people on private property by inflicting unconstitutional orders and mandates of governors, mayors, and others destroys the trust, respect, and a fear of any interaction with the police. We suggest training to the officers or all the people in the policing industry on the Constitution that they take an oath to uphold. I don't think they do that, or they wouldn't be doing what they're doing, more than likely. The so-called pandemic coronavirus and the reaction of the servants in government to the edicts and reactionary controls they placed on the people has brought the current situation to a violent outcome and must be stopped now, or our form of government will be completely gone, and it could lead to a civil war. We, the people, have the power and means to effect a change and force you servants that we elected to manage this republic, that you took an oath to do so. Now, we're not asking, we're demanding that you servants honor your oath and follow the Constitution. We only have the rights that we are willing to stand up for. Otherwise, we are only slaves. And I had a conversation with an ex-policeman yesterday, referred to me by a talk show host over in San Jose. And he's pushing the program, Recall Gavin 2020. Now, you can find that out on the internet by researching that, by punching in recallgavin2020.com, and you will get on your screen an update somewhat similar to this. And we had quite a conversation, his being an ex-policeman, I expressed my views to him, basically on what I just read to you, and he was in total agreement with me. He said, yes, things have gotten clear out of hand. So anyway, we're going to go on with this, and our topics for tonight to be are many. Be sure to call in 559-721-2822. That's Talk Radio KXEX 1550 AM with your questions and comments. I'm going to go on here. I got it written down on my agenda here that we're supposed to be there for a break. I guess I read it too fast. Okay, we will now continue with the talking points on this topic with our co-host Steve Hempling, director of the Free Enterprise Society, and Sue Ann Caesar, if she gets a chance to call in. The opinions and views of our hosts are theirs and do not represent this program or stations. Steve and Sue Ann, the talking points for today show the Russia hoax, besides the police one, the impeachment of Trump, the media bias, the use of police process on non-criminal contacts. Steve, Sue Ann, if you're listening, carry on.
Well, you have a lot of topics there, each of them probably good for several programs. I mean, it is crazy today. I mean, some people are scratching their head. I mean, no one's seen anything like what's happening in the last couple of weeks, especially, or even the pandemic. I mean, these are unprecedented things. And, with the pandemic especially, that was extremely unconstitutional. What they're doing now when the violent protesters and it all goes together with the media bias that you're talking about, because, I mean, it was just a few weeks before the rioting started that CNN, MSNBC, CNBC, ABC were criticizing. I mean, they were going off the deep end about these protesters protesting the lockdowns in Michigan. Remember that? They had guns and everything there. Oh, my God, it's a very dangerous situation, and somebody should put a stop to it. And now that they actually have guns and they have bricks and things and they're breaking everything apart, they say, well, they're just protesting. They're venting their anger, and that should be allowed. Well, that's fine for them, who's sitting some other state in some office somewhere with security guards. And this thing in Seattle, I don't believe that the people living in this community, whatever it is 6 blocks, are really crazy about what's happening. I think they're going to, in fact, some of them are still calling 911, I heard, and the police actually go in and help them, because I don't think the majority of people think this is rational. And this abolish the police. I mean, it all seems crazy. I mean, at least, and I'm not a big really defender of police in many ways, because we've talked about this on other programs. I mean, they're asked to do things that I believe are unconstitutional, and they are not taught much about the Constitution. I've had to sue some deputies in the sheriff's department for stealing my car and arresting me, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm a law-abiding citizen, you see. And when I got in there, I mean, he claims to have been trained in the Constitution, but he's never read it. And in questioning it, it's pretty clear I don't think he's ever seen one. And I gave him one to read. I don't know if he ever did, But I mean, he seemed like a nice guy other than arresting me. I mean, I might go fishing with him, except arresting me in my van and towing my van. That kind of throws cold water on the fishing trip. But most law enforcement people, not all, but most of them are, well-meaning, but they're being trained wrong. This is, one thing the protesters talked about is that training, but the training they're talking about, on not escalating the violence and that kind of thing, I think is good. But there's other training. If the mayors control the police departments, and the governors think they control the mayors and this kind of thing, we start having problems, because where I think the police and the law enforcement's lost their credibility and public support is that they enforce all these crazy, and you call them civil. They're not criminal laws. I mean, you're being arrested for every little thing now. Not having the right color sticker on your license plate, you can get actually arrested for that.
And they can steal your car too.
They can tow your car. This is called forfeiture. And forfeitures, I don't see anything constitutional justification for that at all. They started doing they do forfeiture in Russia and other countries like that, and that's fine. We don't have that here, but they started doing it on drug dealers, if you remember. Yachts full of drugs and stuff like that, they would forfeit them. And nobody cared. Nobody, well, that's a dirty, rotten drug dealer or whatever. But now they use those cases to take your car from you. One guy and farmer in Bakersfield lost his tractor because he ran over a kangaroo rat that was supposedly on the endangered species list. And I mean, it's just crazy stuff, because when you go to court, the way the paperwork read on the tractor is United States of America versus tractor, ID number blah blah blah. Wasn't even the farmer. Now, the tractor didn't have any representation and didn't know how to write a brief, so it lost. I mean,
that is
we
so
should not
true.
put up with these kind of things. I mean, that just defies logic. We should not be putting up with it. Most people are scared of the government, but the point is that the people that are listening, you are the government. We've got to start standing up and learning this, because the schools aren't teaching this any longer, which is pretty obvious.
That's quite true. And getting back to the police and this confrontation with violence and all this, it takes at least two people to start a fight. So when the police are called or ordered to go out because you have these people protesting, if you all use that word very easily, aren't really protesting when they're blocking the street. They're lawbreakers. So the police are called out to try to keep order. And then so these people turn around and harass the police, some throwing things at them, some hitting them, spitting at them, and all this stuff. Would you take that if you were walking down the street and somebody walked up to you and started doing that? These policemen, their police force, have to be trained in very careful constraint of their emotions to not strike back. And some of them can't follow that as closely as others. But the violence starts with the protesters. And the Constitution gives us the right to peacefully protest for redress of grievances, not march down the street harassing people, looting, breaking their businesses, and so forth, and so on. So the whole thing is ludicrous, and it's out of control. Steve?
Well, the First Amendment says that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, which, we're using freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of people to peacefully assemble. You make a good point, because the rioters are not, I don't even consider them protesters. I take a very dim view of the violence, and gee, I'm really mad about something, Truman. We should go down and our favorite little restaurant we like to go to, we're going to go down there and burn it down. You want to go with me? Yeah, that'll make me feel better, because then we'll have no place to go. I mean, you wouldn't burn down their own communities. I mean,
you would not get my consent to go with you on that one.
No, it's idiotic. But it just proves, I think Trump is completely right. These are outsiders coming in. I read an article about Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and where they have some protests going on, but they've been pretty peaceful. But they heard I don't know how they heard it, but they heard that Antifa was sending in some people to Coeur d'Alene, and the people heard about it, and they went out in the streets. I don't know how many, hundreds of them, but they looked like they were thick on the streets, men, women, heavily armed, pistols, rifles. And then they claimed they said we saw several vans come in, white vans, and the people started getting out of them. They were not from the area. People got out, and they had crowbars, they had bricks and stuff like that. And they were met right away by the locals, and they were disarmed, and they were sent on their way, apparently, and no looting took place in Coeur d'Alene. So this is what's happening.
Steve, we are getting our signal for our first break. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, call in at 559-721-2822, Talk Radio KXCX, and we shall return when the music comes back. Okay, Steve, for the viewers on television, we're still here. For those of you on the radio, you'll have to listen to the commercials, but that's a good thing. Listen to them and help patronize those people and help support the station and what we talk about and so forth. Steve, you got any more to comment on your Coeur d'Alene thing, or was that it?
That's really all the information I have on it. I don't know if anything's changed since then. The only other reports I've gotten from some of these places that I've tried to investigate is that, there was things like bricks unloaded, placed in certain parts of certain cities before the violence started. I mean, these are pretty detailed planned events, apparently. And we should not sit there and confuse these people with protesters. They're criminals, and they shouldn't see the light of day. Yeah, they should be absolutely arrested. They're wasting our space. They're wasting our air. And because I think the protesters overall, they have something to protest, and I'm a big fan of protesting. I've done many of them myself, and nothing ever turned violent where we were at.
Yeah,
and
Steve,
I would not support that.
I'm going to break off. We got a caller, so I'm going to see who it is, and I'll be right back. Good afternoon, Truman Sigler, Personalities of the News. You are on the air.
How's it going tonight?
Pretty good. We're just getting started. We're on a commercial break right now, so we're live on TV and so forth. Who's this?
This is Steve from Illinois.
That's what I thought. Want to pose your question, then we'll come back to it when we come back live on the air, which will be about another probably 20, 30 seconds.
Okay, yeah. It's just what you guys have been talking about. It's looks like it's being purposely done.
Well, there's no question of that, and this all takes funding and so forth and so on. We're going to get into some of those areas when we get into our talking points when we come back on the air.
All right.
And we'll go on. But you got anything else that you want to bring up while we're on radio silence, but we're live on the air?
Well, it's just, what's going on in Seattle, that's been planned out for a number of years. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on that they've been working on for quite some time.
Okay, I just got a 15-second signal, so stand by.
Okay.
Welcome back to Personalities in the News. This is Truman Sigler with Steve Hempling, and we have a caller on the air holding while we're making our introduction here, and we're going to continue on with our talking points on this topic with our co-host Steve Hempling of the Free Enterprise Society and Sue Ann when we get her to call in if she can make it. Steve, would you pose your question to Steve?
Yeah, I was just wondering, you guys are talking about all this going on with these protests, and you were talking about bricks and stuff being planted in the streets and stuff like that. Have you ever heard about the Burn Down the American Plantation?
How long ago?
Oh, that's been out for several years.
I can't say as I have. Do they have a website?
Yeah, it's in a PDF form. You can go to it's revolutionaryabolition.org, and you can find it on there. And everything that's going on right now, it seems to have been planned out for quite some time. And it's funny that Seattle's been going to this socialistic or communistic direction for quite some time. And to me, it's being done on purpose, and these cities and states are not doing much against it to keep it from happening, which is what I think is all part of the plan to keep destroying everything about this country, especially the constitutional part of it. I mean, I don't know if you guys would look at it in that same view.
Well, we probably would, because this has been going on for quite a number of years, and if you research back to right even shortly after the country was formed, it was starting the conspiracy, if you want to call it, from there to destroy what we got going for us back in those days. So this is really nothing to do with, there's a lot of people that have never heard of all this stuff before, and it's stuff starting to come out of the woodwork, and that's a good thing. People are becoming aware. We just hope it's not too late, because you got some pretty powerful people with a lot of money that are backing all this, like George Soros and the Rockefellers with their Agenda 21 and so forth and so on.
Yeah, the Ford Foundation, that's another one. Now, do you think that the biggest problem is we've got all these people elected into a political office, you know, in these states, and this is kind of a coordinated effort to do this?
Well, I'd say it goes it goes back at least 100 or more years, right after the Civil War, when the education systems that were spread out and localized all got together and made one education system, which was adopted by the government out of Washington, and that was really the start of the downfall of the of this country.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. So now you guys are hitting some real good points here about what's going on and stuff, and you know, like I said, you know, and I agree with you. Is it too late? I mean, it seems that there's a pretty good stronghold going on, and Mr. Hempfling he points that out quite a bit. You know, so I hope, you know, your show and Mr. Hempfling's society helps out here, trying to get some people back in. So. Well, you guys keep up doing what you're doing.
Well, that's what we're going to do. Well, I've been introduced to a couple other radio and TV hosts, and we're in total agreement. We're just going about it in a little bit different ways.
Right.
We brought up the constructive notice thing, which I think will work if we can get enough people to do it. Most people are afraid to get into it, and they think you have to have an attorney and be a law expert and so forth and so on. But the constructive notice is made for the average person. It's written on the same level as the Constitution is written, so it's not hard to follow. It's easy to do, and this is based on what the government had brought in with all the good drug cartels and so forth back in the day, and that was the RICO actions, racketeering actions. Well, I looked into that when I was going through my travails, and I said, wow, this fits us. We can do it. And we did the constructive notice, and I exercised it, and it works. So that's what I think. And I think we can do it if we can get some sway on the media. That's the big problem right now.
Yeah, that's the biggest. So I'm going to go back to listening. I'm always learning something on your show. So.
Okay, well, thanks for calling. Well, how's things going in Illinois? I see a lot of the stuff that they're putting out.
Same old. Yeah, the governor, he's backing down here and there on everything and stuff. Of course, our judges here. The lawsuit was supposed to be heard on June 10th about where it should be at in federal or district court, and then the judge decided he was going to decide on it on yesterday, on Friday, and now he decided it could be another week or two. So here we go with a judge playing along with the governor here, prolonging this being heard. So this shows you how corrupt the state is, in my opinion.
Is this a private lawsuit, or is it done by attorneys?
It was a state representative, Darren Bailey, filed the suit, and it's in benefit for everybody in the state. pretty much.
Yeah, but has he got lawyers writing the paperwork?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay, well,
yes.
that's the problem, because that brings in the state with their unlimited funds and manpower to counter this, and it'll just be delayed and then delayed and delayed out till everybody thinks it goes away. That's where our system counters that. They can't bring in attorneys in what we're doing.
I'm not sure the representatives have any choice, but still, these lawsuits by these bigger companies that can't afford it, or organizations, I mean, they're winning. I mean, they're winning. California's lost several lawsuits already on the barbers and the salons and that kind of thing going on. So,
well, Steve, I appreciate your calling. We've got some other callers coming in, so I'm going to ring off and let them come in and keep up the fight, man. You're doing a good job.
I'm working on it.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, I thought we had a caller on hold, but I was mistaken. Steve, you want to carry on with what we were going to be talking about?
Yeah, I do want to comment on Steve. Steve is in a tough state there in Illinois. I don't know if he's downloaded the constructive notice yet, but everybody did not have to go to court. I mean, we're putting this out free. We haven't had that many downloads of it. I'd like to see millions of these filed against mayors and the governors around the country, because we have to start taking our Constitution back. This little booklet, which is you could read this in less than an hour. There just isn't that much to it. It's not like a statute that you pick up from the IRS or something that even if you try to read it, even if you read the words, it doesn't. Your head is spinning when you're done, because it just is talks in circles and gobbledygook, and
it's legalese.
Legalese in the worst form. I mean, it is intended to not say anything, a lot of it, and intended to confuse you and make you feel intimidated and too stupid to understand, which is not the case. They're doing this intentionally to make you think that, and so you'll give up. This is the problem with not only the legal profession, but the medical profession. We see in the pandemic, we're listening to these so-called experts, and I don't think they know a whole lot of anything. I mean, they know sickness and certain things, but even Fauci himself didn't. He said the mask didn't do any good, and then a month later he said, well, it might help others not get it, and now he says, oh, yeah, it probably helps you from getting it too. Well, this guy's done this for 40 years. He doesn't know what a mask does. One of those statements might be correct, but the other two are a lie, right?
I would say so. A falsehood, at least.
And I would tend to believe his first statement, saying they don't do much good. So now we're just looking at how much authority do these people have? Every place I go now, well, under governor's order, we can't do this, or state's order. When does a governor have the authority to close a business or tell you to wear a mask? I mean, they're trying to make not having a mask a crime. In San Francisco, it's a $500 fine. But anyway, and this is part of the police problem. Police are being sent out to do these kind of things, and now they have, a lot of police have stood up against the lockdown order.
And the sheriffs especially are standing up to it. Most of them.
But now you got Seattle. I mean, I think that's ridiculous, because Seattle hasn't done anything about this occupation in the middle of its city, and they call it peaceful, which I don't understand.
No,
the mayor of Seattle is completely. She doesn't belong in any political office. She said that they're not terrorists; they are patriots, and that we need. She started saying we, like she's part of this group in the downtown. Need to go further, and it's just not right, because those people have been destroyed. Those businesses are destroyed. Those businesses are not going to come back.
Right. After our next break, which will be coming up here shortly, I'm going to address something that I picked up on the internet yesterday and read it, and it's about the so-called killing or murder of that guy back in Minneapolis, and what actually happened. Possibly in the police's views, and their views are going clear across the country, border to border to border. And I didn't bring it with me to read, but I can paraphrase it. So when we do come back from that break, which we will probably be hearing the music here shortly to go on, and we will address that. Do we have a break, Mr. Engineer?
And don't forget to call us. All right.
Yes, don't forget to call 559-721-2822. Talk Radio KXEX. And we shall return in about 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, Steve, what this is about, I want to bring it up mainly, but if you remember when this murder, killing, or happened, the first thing that they came out with on the first report of what his cause of death was, they said it was drugs and a condition that he had. Then all of a sudden, that all went away. Never heard about that anymore. He supposedly died right there with that man's knee on his neck. And according to the people that were in the ambulance, they resuscitated him. And he broke free and tried to get out. And while he was struggling, he died. And they when they tested him, he had fentanyl in his system and he had a heart problem. And that's what they're saying. So this whole thing is very nebulous at best. So we're going to have to wait for the actual facts to come out, if they're actually factual when they do come out. That's another thing we have to look into. And if that's the case, look at all the upset that has come by people taking for granted what other people said as facts. Look at the ruination it's done to this country and the people. That's all my thoughts right now. You got any, Steve?
Well, I mean, if we don't have all the facts, I don't know how you can make a judgment. This video looked pretty damning, but now, if the ambulance drivers, can verify that, and I assume they can to, a great extent, then that changes the whole picture of this. It's like the hands up, don't shoot thing in Ferguson. That was a lie.
That's right.
But it spread around long before the facts are out. And it was a terrible person to use as a, example of, you can't even let your kid go out and, assault and steal people from a car and try to steal an officer's gun. You're just not safe to let your teenager go out anymore. I mean, it was a bad example.
Yes, it was.
And same with the one in Florida there. So we're picking the cases that are causing all this problem are cases that look more and more like they should have been. They were dealt with properly. I think in Ferguson, that officer had no choice. But one thing on this George Floyd thing, though, I mean, it looked pretty damning, but I will say that I question, I don't know why he's on the ground.
5 seconds, Steve.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Welcome back to Personalities in the News. This is Truman Sigler with Steve Hempling, waiting on a call from Sue Ann, hopefully, so she can give you her views on this from a more legal standpoint of what's going on. And we've got a lot of topics to go on with here. I'm going to tell you about what Steve and I were talking about during the break for you radio listeners. The killing of this man back in Minnesota, or happening, according to the police network of things that should be brought out but are not. In other words, this is their silent hotline, if you want to call it that. That's amongst the police people. And I talked to one yesterday, and he is in an agreement with that, saying this going around. When the man was supposedly died under the knee, which we all saw on television, he died right there. That's what they're saying now. But when they did the autopsy, the first thing that came out was the finding of fentanyl in his system and the fact that he had a severe heart condition. And according to the rumor that's going around with the police, that he didn't die there, he was loaded into the ambulance eventually, and that the paramedics in the ambulance resuscitated him. And then he got loose from his handcuffs and tried to escape And he died there, right in the middle of doing that. So if that's the case, look what's going around now. They don't mention that in any of the media, nowhere. So like we say, the facts are not all out yet. It's still playing out. But that would change the whole picture on everything that's happened to this country in the last 2 weeks. The rioting, the burning, the killing, all this accusations of against the police, which we had addressed that at the first part of our program. So there's more to all of this than what meets the eye. Steve, you were talking about the Antifa people coming in to a city in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. You want to repeat that again, or we can go into another topic?
Well, did I do that on break? Really? Okay.
No, we're not on break now.
Well,
yeah.
Coeur d'Alene, I did mention it, but that must have been on break, maybe?
I think so, partially both.
Well, okay. Well, Coeur d'Alene, they got word that the Antifa is sending in some people on a certain night, and to cause problems there. I mean, they're assuming to cause problems, and the word got around. I mean, they've had protests there a little bit. I don't know how big a town it is, but they, when the people in the town found out about it, they came out. They came out, men, women, with rifles and pistols on their side. They stood there all night in the downtown areas where the protests were supposed to happen. And they even seen the vans come in. There were several vans coming in they were not locals. They came in from out of the area. Big white vans were loaded up with people. They come off the van with supposedly with bricks and rocks and crowbars and different things like that. They were met by the citizens right away, disarmed, and sent on their way. And that you're not welcome here. And there was no looting in that town. Now, I don't know if anything's changed, but, the police backing off just doesn't make any sense. And the police trying to support them, even with tear gas and stuff, they're being accused of more, brutality. And, people are throwing bricks at you. They have a right, just like anybody would think, to defend themselves. This whole thing is like Ferguson. Ferguson was a lie. The hands up, don't shoot. But still today, even though that's proven a lie, I mean, without question anymore, most people don't give 2 cents about that. They believe in the hands up, don't shoot line, and then that was wrong. If what you're saying is correct, and it could be, if he woke up in the ambulance or was not really dead, then these officers have been charged and they're going to have to be dismissed. If that happens, people are going to be very upset over that. At least some people. Because they've got so much energy and emotion into this thing now. But one thing I noticed also is, they keep saying that this is like almost an epidemic on black deaths, and I show that in the last 3 years, not counting this year even, that we had 457 deaths that were white in 2017. And 223 deaths in 2017 black. And we go forward to 2019, 370 whites and 235 blacks.
Are these what you're referring to? Are police involvements?
Police shootings overall.
Police shootings. Okay, that's what I thought.
And the only things I can find on unarmed people is unarmed for last year, 2019. Unarmed black people were 10. Unarmed white people were 20. I mean, that can't happen. But it doesn't seem like such an epidemic, although, blacks have other issues. That doesn't necessarily mean shootings, and you have poor areas. But to wreck our society is really not making any sense to me. I mean, the poor people, even the poor people in this country, live better than some middle class in many other countries. I mean, India, some people have talked about it. They're middle class, but they don't have running. They have running water, but they don't have hot water. They barely got a car that runs. And one guy, I mean, that's just the way it is. If you're poor, you don't have a car. But if you have a car, it's barely running, and you don't have the things that you have here. Even the poor people generally have electricity, have a refrigerator, that kind of thing, heat and air conditioning, or heat at least. So, in many countries, we don't. The people just don't have these things. We made so many improvements in this country. It's another thing that I think. I mean, I've had black roommates. I got black friends, and to me, from the '60s, forward, it has gotten so much better, really, in my opinion. And that doesn't mean in the middle of the, in some communities like that in Los Angeles, I don't know. I mean, I don't live there. But I will say it just seemed to get so much better in my travels around the country. And President Obama being black, I thought, well, that might make an improvement, even though I don't agree with his politics. And it seemed to get much worse when he sided with, against the Ferguson comp and then against the security guard there in Florida and saying, I think Trayvon Martin could be my son. When the truth comes out, it's just not that flattering to say that's my son. These are crimes being committed, and we have to have somebody to take it.
Right.
These are not libertarians fighting out there or even protesting, but even the libertarians, they kind of think, some of them anyway, would think we don't even need a criminal code. If somebody murders your wife or something, you can just sue them in civil court.
No, that won't work.
That's ridiculous.
Well, if you remember back in back in Los Angeles back in the 60s on the Rodney King thing, the riots that happened in the Watts part of L.A., they destroyed their whole means of making a living and people's businesses and killings of people. Like that truck driver was just driving down the street in L.A., delivering merchandise to these places, and they hauled him out of his truck and almost beat him to death. I mean, that's absolutely criminal. And they say they were protesting. Well, what were they protesting to cause that kind of action? So, and that's the same thing that's going on today. All these people are all riled up by the bias in the media, the false reporting, the blowing up of something that it was very minor, and all of these things. And the people believe it. And the first thing that I was taught when I was in civics class in the early 50s, that you don't trust the government. It's written right into the Constitution. That's your First and Second Amendments. Don't trust the people in government.
They sure do have a big trust in government.
Yes. And so how many of them are getting things from the government that are doing the protesting? I'm not talking about just the blacks, but it's endemic throughout the whole country.
There's a lot of anger right now anyway, Truman, because of the pandemic. I mean, if you're working a low paying job, you haven't had a paycheck for 12 weeks.
That's right.
Or more. That's going to yield a lot of anger. So.
And it has. It's and getting back to the police thing, I have several customers that I work on their personal cars for them, and they're welcome into my shop. They're nice people, every one of them, and I don't have any problems with them, and I feel for them because the abuse that they have to put up with, like in a traffic stop, which that's a whole another thing in our viewpoint. That's why I wish Sue Ann would call in and talk about that, but because we have in the past, it's with abuse that they take and pulling somebody over that don't know who is there, and how many of them are getting blown away or run over or trapped trying to get the keys out of the car and so forth and drugged down the road. Would you want to be a policeman and face all those things? That takes tremendous restraint on your emotional system to try to handle yourself, to try not to trigger something like that. But some of these people, they're violent. And it's a tough job, and they deserve a lot of respect and a lot of backing up as long as they follow the law and their training. And if training is done properly and they learn the law that they take an oath up to, I don't think we'd have a problem with the police at all.
Well, also, they don't clean their house. Most communities and cities don't clean their own house. If they have an officer who is abusive, they keep him. Or if even when they get sued, we had a friend of mine got beat up on Easter Sunday over here in Fresno. You may remember. So and we went out into court, and even the officers are out there trying to get him off of my friend, who thought he was going too far. But they all come and defended the officer. The entire department came to defend the officers. And he should, he shouldn't have a badge on there. And that leads to disrespect of the police. I mean, because I'm sure my friend wasn't the only one ever, accosted by the guy. So.
But when they use their authority that's given to them to be a peace officer, I respect that. But when they change modes and go into a revenue agent mode, like in traffic, or like in telling you can't go into this restaurant because the governor says, and all of these civil things or statutory things that you have to sign into to become subject to them, it breeds disrespect and lack of trust, and it makes you not to want to have any interaction with them at all, because you're fearful that, well, they're going to steal my car, or they're going to arrest me for opening the door and walking into this restaurant. I mean, it's ludicrous. Steve, we got a break coming up. We'll be gone for about 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned, and we have more to come. Okay, you want to carry on with that thread?
Yeah, well,
a little bit.
Yeah, I had some thoughts on it. I'm kind of trying to put it together here. The police need to, like I say, clean their own house. I've talked to officers about it, and many of them agree, because most officers are well-meaning. I think they're poorly trained, especially in the Constitution. When I sued the deputies there in Fresno Sheriff's Department, that was years ago now.
Yeah, I was in on that.
Yes, you were. And he claimed to know the Constitution, but he didn't know it. I mean, there's no question he didn't know it. And he also was pretty friendly, not friendly when we started, but he got friendly as the suit went on, because he knew, I kept saying, I'm not really suing you. I am suing you, but it's because of your relationship to the Fresno Sheriff's Department. Now, the Sheriff's Department in Fresno has really improved under Margaret Mims, too, by the way, I think. So, but anyway, they're not trained in the Constitution. They're not trained in my rights. I mean, remember Officer Jack McLam, and he got really upset with a guy once. He said, because he thought he was the greatest police officer ever, and then one guy finally said, you can't defend my rights or protect my rights when you don't know what they are.
That's true.
And he got very upset over that comment. I mean, he was just driving home. He was just under the breath all the time, cussing that guy, I guess, and is what his story is. But he went and then actually learned about the Constitution, and the guy was right. The police training didn't include it. It used to. I mean, in years past, they actually trained you a lot on the Constitution. So. Yeah,
that's right. You remember when they impounded your van?
Yes.
And we used the variant of the constructive notice to get it back, using the laws that were and statutes that were written at the time. And when my helper and myself went out there to actually get the van, the lady had told us, well, he's not here, this and that and everything else. Well, while we were discussing this thing with her, he walked up. And we got just a couple seconds. I'll continue that as soon as we come back, because it was funny, hilarious. Welcome back to Personalities in the News with our co-host Steve Hempling, with our presentations and our talking points. And anyway, I was talking about the case that when we went out to get Steve's van back after it was impounded by the Sheriff's Department for a phony thing that they pulled on him to confiscate it. Anyway, we arrived out at this person's place of business. It was a tow company. And we went up to the desk and I told the lady we'd like to see the owner. Well, he's not here right now. And I said, well, we do need to talk to him if at all possible. And this was delaying time. And we walked outside to get ready to go home without the van. And this guy walks up and introduces himself. May I help you? Yes, sir. Here's your papers. He opened them up because he got served right there. And we got the van back and drove it away. And he was very, very, very upset. You remember that one, Steve?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think I think it wasn't a big tow company, but I think he was just kind of an individual guy. But he was towing for the sheriff's department, and he kind of went out of business over the lawsuit.
That's right.
Followed.
He did go out of business.
And that wasn't really my intent, but the other tow truck companies heard about this, and they kind of refused to tow for the sheriff's department for a while there. That was a positive thing. But this idea of defunding the police or getting rid of them, got one guy, a comment from Sam on Facebook. He said we should defund the FBI. I kind of support that idea more than the police. But we could talk about what would it look like without police? I mean, what would really happen? You can't get rid of law enforcement exactly, but when you get down to it, Fresno City, for example, is a corporation. When they incorporated it, changed everything. That's why they have a police department. And I don't know that from a legal standpoint, I mean, they're treated like government in a way, but since they're a corporation, it's almost like they're just private security for a corporation.
Well, that's very true. Sue Ann is very knowledgeable on that issue, and she was going to talk about that tonight if she could get through to call in. So possibility her phone system isn't working right. She's up in the mountains. But she says the police force was put into being to protect the property of the city and all of that. Well, it's morphed into to protecting all the people and this and that and everything else. And if the officers that are enforcing all these city mandates and regulations, they should be doing it constitutionally, but not knowing the Constitution, this is what happens.
Well, they're not constitutional officers.
No, they're not constitutional officers.
So what would it look like? Let's just say we get rid of the Fresno Police Department, move all the police members over to the Sheriff's Department, and train them properly. Because the Sheriff's Department actually is there to defend people. I've seen cases where the police do not have to come to your house and aid you. They don't have any legal responsibility to do that, according to the courts that I saw.
That's right.
They usually do it, but...
well, that's because their hearts are in the right place. And I think, according to all the statistics I've thought and saw and people I've talked to in law enforcement, the domestic calls are the ones that they fear the most, because this domestic terror that's going on in that house. And a lot of the people are harmed, like we are given the constitutional right to be armed. And so there's a lot of bad things that happen on these domestic calls. So I have my hats off to these officers when they're there to keep the peace, acting as a peace officer. But when they switch modes and go into revenue collection, I give them all the resistance that I can without getting arrested.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting concept of getting rid of the police. I've been thinking about that, but I think, expanding the Sheriff's Department might be a good thing, because then the police would not be under the mayor's control. The mayor's, decide, the mayor is the one pulling the police out of these areas, and the sheriff would have to be the one, and the sheriff wouldn't do that.
No.
I don't think. If the sheriff were in charge and had enough officers, we wouldn't be seeing the looting, and we wouldn't see this thing in Seattle happening if they were responsible for that.
Well, on our program a few weeks ago, we had Sheriff Mack on, and he told about those things, what their responsibilities were, and where their limits of authority was, and that they were elected, not appointed, and not joined voluntarily. The sheriff is an elected position, so that person, man or woman, is responsible to the people that elected them to that office, and then the officers under him are also subject to those same conditions.
I want to retouch one thing. The recallgavin2020.com. I think that's very important. Gavin Newsom is like...
He's a tyrant.
Yeah, he's never worked a real day in his life. He is related to Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco. When he was the mayor of San Francisco, the city went from a fairly nice place to a toilet. You got to walk and jump over human feces now to go to San Francisco. It's awful. And California as a whole now, he's just doing the same thing to California. Homelessness is all over the place, even up here in the mountains. I mean, it's getting to be ridiculous.
Yeah, I just put this
Well,
up so you can see it. When you go online and put the recall Gavin 2020.com, this is what comes up. And there's a whole bunch of updates there. There's also, when you get into the generic part of the internet, there's a lot out there that even talks about the last attempt that failed. And so it's very interesting. It's very important for us to follow these things and get our input in and get this thing going. And like I said, I talked to the police officer who was a police officer that was introduced to me by a fellow radio host, and I explained how we did our show and what our position was, and he said he agreed with everything they were doing and what we're saying, and that was very gratifying.
Yep, the major media just doesn't cover this very well. Now, I do want to also point out at freeenterprisesociety.com, Free Enterprise Society, all one word, no spaces or underscores. freeenterprisesociety.com is our website, and when you get there, one of the first things at the top is the constructive notice, and we're giving that away for free. And you do not have to go to court behind this notice. I would like to see hundreds of thousands or millions of these notices going to mayors, to governors, and recalls following them. I mean, we just cannot let up on these people after they shut down the state. I mean, if the federal government did not really do this, their stuff was all guidelines, not mandatory. It is the state governors and the mayors of some of these cities that did these lockdowns, and we should not allow that to ever happen again. And everyone who did it has hurt so many people. I mean, we cannot let them go. They at least need to lose their job, but I would like to see them prosecuted.
Well, looking at it from that vein, because of their oath of office, they were mandated and still are to follow the Constitution, not their own thoughts or those types of things. So what they have done, in my opinion and others, is committed treason, and they should be held accountable. And who's going to do that? The government's not going to do it. We have to do it, and we can do it by this peaceful process of notice, and then follow through with the lawsuits under that, where they can't use an attorney to come in and fight this, and the state's money and so forth and so on. This is a real grassroots effort that could really turn the tables on these people that think that they are God, and you have to do what they say, and they're tyrannical and so forth.
Yeah, we have a comment here from Kyle, kind of following up on that. We, the people, elect officials and grant those officials certain powers, and those powers cannot be handed out to some other person. The police chief is appointed, not elected. Our sheriff department should be the top law enforcement in the county. I don't have I can't see the rest of it, but I think that's a good point, because the police chief is appointed by the mayor, and therefore is going to do what the mayor tells him to do.
How many? I see you're reading from a list there of callers from the internet.
Yes.
Could you go into a few? How many we got, and how's it doing? And thank you for doing this. I'm talking about the people that are calling in.
Well, there's some others. Sam says, don't trust the government. Well, I agree with that. Another one from Sam. I wonder how many feds are provocateuring the protest. Well, it's a question. We just don't know. I mean, we don't know how many inside people are trying to destroy this country as well. I think there are certainly. Trump is surrounded by some of them.
I would agree with that.
The former governor of Colorado did a speech after, he wasn't in office anymore, on how to destroy this country. And it was a pretty simple plan, open borders and these kind of things. And we're seeing it all happen. And so I assume he's involved with it. He seemed to be enthusiastic about it, not trying to stop it. So what's the point of it? Why would they want to do that? I would agree that the federal government is all too powerful. Our country has become so arrogant and problematic. But I still think we can, clean the swamp, as Trump wants to do. But we need more honest people in government.
Yes, we do.
The government's been taken over by the swine.
Yeah. Where are some of the states being shown on the people that are making comments on the social media? Does it say?
It doesn't say, no.
It used to. On the one I was getting in here, I don't have that one anymore. Okay.
Well, I'm just looking at just Facebook period.
Yeah, I am getting a signal here in just a moment that we're going to be closing out for the evening. There is the signal audibly. If you like our format and topics, let us know and tell others. Our time is up for this evening. Thanks to the hosts for their views and opinions. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Tune in next week, same time and new station, Talk Radio, KXCX 1550 AM and TV channel 32.3. Truman Sigler and Steve Hempling for personalities in the news. Good night.